Do quick intros.
Yeah, hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Nathan Disk with StartEngine, and I'm excited to be joined by Atombeam CEO and Chairman Charles Yeomans, along with Alexandria Tucker, AI scientist for PCM. Welcome both of you.
Thanks, Nathan.
Today's conversation will take a closer look at the thinking behind Atombeam's technology, the growing importance of data efficiency in the age of AI, and some of the opportunities and challenges Charles and Alex are seeing across the industry. So we're going to spend roughly the first 30 minutes hearing from Charles and Alex, and then we're going to open it up to audience Q&A as usual. So please feel free to submit your questions throughout the conversation, and we're going to try to get to as many as possible. But before we begin, I want to remind everyone that investing does involve risk, and today's discussion is intended to provide information about Atombeam and its business. So please refer to Atombeam's offering materials on StartEngine for complete information regarding the offering and associated risks. And if you want to stay up to date with Atombeam, make sure you follow them on their StartEngine offering page. That way you can stay up to date with any future updates about the company. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to Charles and Alex. So I think we have a deck prepared, so we can pull that up, and then I'll let Charles take it away.
Right. Yeah, good. So thanks very much, Nathan. And it's great to be here again talking to folks.
I can't hear Charles at all. Is that just my side?
Oh, no, not that again.
I can hear Charles.
Shoot. Okay, I feel like Nadine had this issue last time we were on here.
We did. Maybe drop off.
Should I go off and come back on?
Yeah, go off and come back, and I will.
Best way to do this.
For a bit.
I can't hear anything. I
only hear anything. Drop off real quick, okay. And then we'll try to add you back in, and Charles can get the intro rolling.
All right, sounds good.
Okay. All right. So while Alex is
there we go.
I'll kick this off. So we are we're talking about here something that is something that's really profoundly different than any other AI out there, and it's hard to overemphasize how big a deal this is. What we're talking about here is something that nobody else has. There isn't any other capability out there that looks like this, and everybody's searching for it. If you think now what's going on this year, I can't remember, it's over $1 trillion is going into AI. Maybe it's $1.5 trillion, I think I read. Anyway, don't quote me on it, but it's some very big number. And that is, a lot of that is going in because of one basic issue, which is the AI that's out there right now, all the LLMs and the smaller versions, they call small language models, SLMs, are capable of only answering questions through a set of computations that it does consistently over and over. And it does the same computation set, whether it's the first time it's been asked that question or the 1 millionth time. And I mean literally millionth, because if you think about the number of inquiries people ask AIs and how much it's the repetition of the same thing, the fact that AI doesn't learn anything is profoundly a massive impact. So if we think about that, and what that implies, it's like, think about if you woke up in the morning and you had no idea where you were, you had no idea where the kitchen was, what you were supposed to do next, and that happened every single day. And that's what we're talking about with the current AI. It's amazing to me that the world hasn't already concluded there has to be a better way. There has to be something that looks more like a human brain and operates on the efficiency level of a human brain, which is 20 watts roughly, not gigawatts. There's an article that came out just recently that I think it's AWS data center, a big data center in I think Texas, was going to be the biggest producer of CO2. 7.5 gigawatts plus. And, we can't just keep doing this. Somebody has to come up with something better. And we think we have. And we have 281 patents around that. And so we're very fortunate here to have Alex here to walk us through what it really is, because I could only give you the topmost level, but she's in deep and understands it in a very profound way, which is great to have her on board here, not only as a part of the team, but here today to talk about it. So if you wouldn't mind moving on to the next slide. So really quickly, a few things to think about with what is going on with AI right now. So, big companies, doctors, the military, and so forth are all thinking the same thing, which is it's really, really inefficient, and it can't be relied upon. You are talking about a probability, statistical, probabilistic machine, and so it can't figure out, anything beyond, guessing the next word. And that's all it really does. It's like a giant autocomplete. And the other big thing is it can't explain how it arrived at its conclusion. And that is, say, internally. Yeah, you can ask it, walk me through how you got there. That's not the same thing as the internals of the machine being described. Another thing is, as I mentioned, it doesn't learn. And that makes it dramatically inefficient. And Alex is going to walk you through what that really means. But it also means, though, fundamentally, it's gigantic. And there's no getting around it. You can't sort of like tweak it and make it a little better. Yeah, you can make it better, but you're not going to get to a point with it in which you can say, fundamentally, I've got a different paradigm here without changing the architecture. And that's what we're talking about with PCM. So, Alex, you want to take it from the next slide on?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the interesting things that was brought up is, our brains function off of 20 watts. And, obviously we need lots and lots and lots of compute that needs to be constantly increasing in order to actually get intelligence in current AI. And I had one person argue, well, we evolved over the course of so many years to have this, how much energy went into the evolution of bringing our brains to the level that it is right now, that it's steady state. And maybe that's what we're doing, but I think if you look at the statistical models, it's not that it's learning to think more efficiently or categorize things better or, create a map of its own intelligence in the way that we currently do. It's kind of just needing more and more and more to do less and less and less, marginal improvements. And so, basically what the PCM does is it actually does create, you can call it a map. I think that's the easiest way to think about it. If you imagine that you are in a city for the first time and you're walking around, you can make a map of that city, and the next time you come back, you can work through that map again. Or if you think about, in your own brain, thoughts that you've had a lot or experiences that you've had a lot almost become knee-jerk reactions because those neural pathways become a lot cheaper to use. And so effectively, what the PCM does is, instead of using a statistical, scatter the balls through and see where they land and see where they end up, it really truly creates a geometric and topological landscape of not just the data correlations, but actually the usage and the relationships between them in specific use cases. So, one of the big important things here is that because it has this map, it knows when it's in an uncharted part of, let's say, the city, right? So if you're asking it a question that requires it to take a route that it is unfamiliar with, that solution at the end cannot be confident. Whereas, current statistical models will just fill in the blanks, they'll extrapolate, maybe they'll draw a line straight through a building and say, haha, I found the path, and you just drive straight through this building and you'll get there, right? And so that's, one of the key things with PCM is that it recognizes this is uncharted territory, or it can say, interesting, there's actually two paths here that lead to the same point. And instead of just, bulldozing, giving you one of them, it comes back and can actually tell you, these are two conflicting routes to the same thing. Here's the information that I know about it. or there is no root at all, and that's, the block refuse. It can refuse it entirely and say, this is not a correct answer. And, depending on how you want to use it, can actually go back and look for alternative methods or paths that it does know that are familiar to give you that solution. So I think that's, one of the great things about it. And I think we can move to the next slide. Right. Yeah. So what it buys side by side, truthfulness is, it tells you what it knows, and it can say it with actual mathematical, geometric, topological certainty. But it also knows that it doesn't know something and can admit that. So whether or not it is working together with an LLM and an SLM and, filtering through, which is one of the things that it can do, and say, hey, actually, we don't know enough to say this properly. This is actually a hallucination coming from this, or it's being used independently from those things, and being able to know based off of the information that it's trained on, we can't actually say this. But maybe if you gave me this information, or if we knew this, or we could shift the system here, I do see a path to something that we could find, and it will then suggest it. And then explanation, as Charles was saying, you ask it to explain itself, and what it does then is it puts in a new prompt.
Nope. Uh-oh.
Looks like we lost her.
Yeah. I don't know what happened here.
Technical difficulties.
Sorry about that.
There she
Don't know
is.
why it keeps booting me out here. So basically, it goes through and asks itself again, come up with the most reasonable explanation of how we got to this conclusion. It doesn't actually tell you how it got to the conclusion. Whereas, if you have a PCM with its map and everything is stored in this geometric structure of knowledge, it can tell you exactly the path it took. Why? That's the whole point of it, is it can explain to you even the nuances around taking each path, and how each path potentially even changes the meaning of the solution that it arrives at, which is also non-trivial. There's a lot of situations where you arrive at the same conclusion, but from very different directions. So then, let's see, moving on. So yeah, learning, it learns live. It's basically able to adapt, shift, and move, and similar to kind of how we learn live. We experience things and we kind of take it, we're a little bit skeptical maybe at first, maybe we see it a few times, and then we start getting confident that that's actually what's going to happen, right? And so there's different layers and different levels of learning and understanding within the PCM that allows it to live learn without completely disrupting. It's not something that you can go and tell it complete nonsense and it runs around thinking it knows everything because it just learned nonsense. It really is able to collect it in different layers of depth of knowledge and understanding that also can react on faster levels. If it's something that it knows really well, it can respond really quickly. If it's something that it's not, it's going to start looking more at these different levels and different layers. And then the size and the cost, surprisingly, even though it has all of these features, because it has an underlying known structure of knowledge that forms, that learns, that evolves, that becomes more and more efficient, it doesn't go in every time, like Charles was saying, it doesn't wake up every day not knowing where the kitchen is. It has a perfect map of where everything is, that learns, that evolves, that grows. And so it doesn't even really need to run simulations. If something in the world changes, it can immediately shift and adjust what the landscape is that it's dealing with, and then immediately see how that impacts the paths to the places that it's going without having to pull it offline, retrain it on all of this data, and then hope, that training gets in there in a way that becomes useful. And this allows it to become, to have very small size, smaller costs, and as he was saying, as it learns, learning becomes more and more efficient. So the more it learns, the easier it becomes to learn. It's able to compartmentalize, similar to how we compartmentalize things, and have different centers for different areas of knowledge that allow it to be a lot cheaper, a lot quicker, require less memory, etc. And then the data stays behind your firewall. It is geometry. So if you have two federated systems and you want to send information between them, you don't need to send anything other than a geometric delta, which is how did this small region shift compared to where it was last synced, right? And that information doesn't hold any meeting at all unless you already have the entire constantly changing geometric substrate, right? So that way, yeah.
Give us specific, make people feel like, all right, this is what I would see in the real world, and also explain what federated means, please.
Right. Okay. So federated, let's say you have, 2 drones that need to work together to do something. Let's say in the military, they're on a mission, they need to do something. So, I don't know how it currently works actually in current military, but I know that one of the biggest challenging things is keeping all of your data in a way where you're not transferring information across that could be intercepted that then alerts everybody to the information that you're sending, or that is easy to decrypt or easy to recognize. So if you have 2 systems and they both have their own maps, and let's say, they're synced up at first, they have their same maps, and then one drone experiences something that alters, the mission. Maybe, the thing that the ship they were going to observe has sunk, that changes things. And the other drone would typically be oblivious to this. Things don't learn, change, evolve. What does that mean for the mission? What do we need to do now? And basically what this would be able to do is it would immediately send a delta change. This is the small delta that altered, that changed, right? And it can send that back to the control room as well, while just saying, coordinate this is now, shifted in this way, stretched, contorted, whatever. And that information allows each of the systems that are connected, be it the control center, be it the other drones, to immediately update that segment of their map as well and come up to speed without having to go offline and fully retrain. I hope that was a good. I'll try to stick to real world examples because I think that's that's very helpful.
Yeah, the more you can make it like relatable, that's the key thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Great.
Next slide then.
Next slide, yeah. Let's see. In use. Valve spec. Right. So basically the PCM is able to learn everything that it needs to be able to handle a situation. Like if a technician asks about a valve spec, it is able to immediately access the knowledge that it has in a way that recognizes when it doesn't have enough information from the technician to answer, right? That can also be the case. Let's say the technician needs to provide more information for it to actually be able to truthfully answer the question. I think current systems, they kind of just extrapolate, they fill in the blanks, and you don't know really where they filled in the blanks. So this system would be able to exactly find the manual and say, okay, this looks like this region of the manual, this is information that's missing, and based off of this information, it shifts us into different answers. Can you please provide this information? Would be one example of that. And then, if something changes in the system, you don't have to pull everything offline. So, in this example, let's say Unit 7 was retrofitted in June. Basically, every PCM, federated again, if you have multiple of them that are dealing with different technicians or different parts of the service, immediately are updated and aware that this happened, and it immediately shifts the geometry in such a way that it can answer based off of this. It's not something you have to pull it offline. It can immediately respond to the shift and understand it in a more complex way than current AI, because what it does is it actually brings in different levels. We talk about topology and geometry and all of this stuff, but really what that is nuances. There's different nuances, connections, and correlations to events and things that happen. And that's what it learns when things come in, and it can happen immediately, and immediately be able to know that and propagate that through the system.
What the heck?
I don't know. It's more technical issues. Hopefully she'll
beginning to wonder if it's that I'm on Safari. I don't know. I keep saying check your internet, but my internet's great.
Yeah.
So I've been running it on my laptop. So it definitely runs on laptops. It doesn't require a lot to work. It's basically storing a map, updating a map, and everything that's stored a lot of the things that are stored are not just compounding information, they're shifting and adapting information. So it's not more and more and more, it is changing, shifting geometric information, and tracking that over time is a very small amount of cost in storage. Yep. And then,
So
yeah.
just sort of talking about like what this would look like. So like I'm talking to really, really high level people in the Pentagon. They want to know things like, okay, what if I have a cheap drone? What if I have 1,000 cheap drones all in a swarm? And can I mount PCM on each one of them? And can they federate? And can they operate independently if they're cut off from communication? And, you know, they want to know things like that. So maybe you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So right now, I think, you know, when drones go offline, so if they're, you know, federated as we explained before, and they're on this mission, and then, you know, let's say comms get interrupted somehow between the two of them, they kind of diverge pretty quickly. Let's say if they were just to, you know, stay on and just continue with what current AI would advise them to do, there's no way that they're not going to diverge. If you sit there with two different chat bots and you try to ask them different things, or maybe even the same thing, they're going to diverge significantly already.
Why?
Huh?
Why
What was that?
Why
is that? Well, everything's statistical, right? So there's a probability that, you know, you put an egg on a roof, it's going to go right or is it going to go left? And that becomes more and more complex. And if it goes right, there's a whole different scenario for that. And if it goes left, there's a whole different scenario for that. So if you imagine you have a whole fleet of these drones and they're all putting an egg, you know, on a roof to decide which direction they're going to go, and they continue doing that, you just get, you know, just exponential divergence between all of these systems. Now, imagine instead that they each have this map. So they get disconnected and they know at the last point that they were connected, they had the same map to navigate with. Now, they can see their own environment. They can see that things are shifting and changing, but, you know, it's also known that they can't communicate across. So that information is also weighs in. So if it learns something new, it doesn't just assume, well, now everything knows it. It knows that that can't be as heavily weighted in its decision, thinking that everything else knows that as well, right? So it can accumulate this information, act as intelligently as possible based off of, you know, probabilistic what could have changed in the other drone scenarios. And then the second that it comes back online, the deltas are shared across the entire fleet, and they immediately are back to having identical maps and being able to act and work appropriately without having to go back, retrain them, you know, get one up to speed with what the other one learned, or somehow extrapolate between the two. You know, this is something that it just becomes a instantaneous, you know, this is what reality is now with a full picture back together. Yeah.
Right. So like, think about cars, like autonomous cars. Like other than San Francisco, we have Waymos around. They work really well. What is the difference inside the car if you had a PCM-driven car versus a Waymo transformer-based AI car?
Well, I don't know if you guys love watching the videos of Waymo flying off docks and, you know, doing all sorts of wild things. But, you know, the PCM would, you know, maybe one does that once and immediately they all learn, okay, you know, that's something that we don't do. And so, you know, maybe you lose one Waymo to the dock, but you don't lose two. And, you know, they start learning actual deeper cognitive structures. It's not just a yes, no binary, you know, did this work or did it not work? And okay, now I have to go back and, you know, and let the whole team know so that we can train them all. It is an immediate nuanced understanding of situational awareness, what in that situation went wrong, how it went wrong, why, you know, and those are the things that it can learn from, you know, really quickly. I don't think there would be as many fun videos to watch, unfortunately. But I think fortunate for the people in the cars, you know, you wouldn't have them doing all of the wild things over and over.
So talk a little too about what you've sometimes talked about, which is physics, the universe, geometry, the bigger picture.
Yeah. Also, as most of you probably know, I'm a theoretical astrophysicist. So my focus has been black holes and black hole dynamics and understanding how the most massive structures that have existed, they're primordial, that have existed since the beginning of the universe, form, evolve, shape. And I think something that everyone knows from physics is that it tries to be as efficient as possible. There's no reason for it to be extravagant and use more energy than it needs to, or have more basically than it needs. And so from studying these structures, you really recognize, well, geometry is gravity, and gravity is geometry for anyone who, that's Einstein's theory of general relativity. So when I talk about geometry, we're really talking about the structure of things such as the universe, the way that the universe structures itself to become more and more efficient, to save on information, the structures it forms. I mean, even if you look at the structure of dark matter in the universe, it actually mimics the structure of how our neural network is connected in our brain. And all of this is a geometry. There's geometry and topological reasons for the way that these things become more efficient, right? So if you look at that and you look at how the universe works, it's not randomness. Not everything is just a random process. It might look like it to us because there's way too many variables for us to, hold in our own minds, but this is exactly how the universe works. And if you find a stability point, so maybe you can actually think about, if a thought comes in through the PCM and you want to know, is this a stable thought? Is this a thought that we can trust? If there's a ball sitting at the bottom of a hill and you push it, it just rolls right back down to that hill. That's a stable point. So,
okay. Well, sorry about the disruptions, folks.
Based off of geometry, that it's going to be stable. And, in the opposite case, if it's on a hill, if you nudge it just a slight bit, it's going to roll a different way. Or, if there's multiple paths to a thing, if you shift it just slightly, it's going to take an entirely different path. And that's how you can tell, wow, this thing isn't stable. We actually don't know, too much about this yet because it's taking these different paths. So there's a lot to be learned, I think, from the world of physics, and then, digging into neuroscience, neurobiology, and, everything down to particle physics, understanding how they deal with high dimensional structures and correlations. And, it's how the universe works. So, why should it not be how AI works?
Relate that to PCM though. How does it go to, you start with the universe and now you got PCM? What is that? How do you get there?
Right. So, in the universe, matter clumps together and it forms these black holes or planets or other things. They form these systems, and when a mass is injected into them, they know exactly how to move. So now imagine in the PCM where your thoughts clump together. And I think it's the same for us. If you think of a cat, you think cute and fluffy, and there's a whole lump of thoughts around that thing. And you don't have to every time try to figure out what exactly are the different nuances of the thing, and they might come out different every time. It actually, clumps this idea together and then forms effectively an attractor, or something that has a gravitational pull. This is a thought that is successful. It's easy to access, and you can go there quicker and more frequently. So, and not only that, but black holes, as they gain information, or as they absorb things, they actually scale with a sublinear scaling to the amount of information that goes into them. And there's certain characteristics to that are very much transferable to knowledge as well. So when we say sublinear scaling, a lot of that comes from the natural world and how black holes naturally sublinear scale with their knowledge as well.
Yeah, and when Brian sought out, Brian being the guy who's originally thought of PCM, sought out someone to help him. He looked specifically for someone who had expertise in black holes, which is sort of amazing to think about like that. And Alex said, "What the hell?"
At first, I thought it was a very targeted scam. I was like, there's not many of us. What do you mean you're looking exactly for someone who does Riemannian geometry and studies black holes and, the geometry of the universe? Because that's really what the whole concept is built on. I've never seen any company look for that ever. Still, has never come to my attention. And it's really unique, and to see AI written in there as well really, sparked my interest and really has ever since.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's move to the next slide.
Oh yeah. Let's see. Yeah, so we already had a model that we were working with of the PCM. It's like our baby PCM. A lot of theory was evolving. I started a year ago, and we almost immediately started with the naval tactical scenario that we took to the Navy, working with that instance of the PCM. And at that point, we were really just working with geometry, not all the other layers and everything else that went with it. And the idea was to create a PCM mini war game where a PCM would play against an LLM. And the question was, will the PCM eventually learn and evolve to have better techniques to lean towards the decisions that made it succeed? But not only that, but it was also capable of thinking through almost to the end of the game and showing in a decision tree how each decision that you make in this battleship scenario would lead you to success and the probability of each of those. And it wasn't just a tree that stood there and looked pretty. It was constantly evolving, changing the branches, the branch lengths, showing how much success or not this direct path would take with different options. And that's all something it can do without having to run a simulation, because it already has the map. All it has to do is, from this current point, these are the successful paths, and just branches them out and can show you. And then the second something alters, it just changes where it is located on the map. So that was really cool to be able to show them that. And in the meantime, our theory kind of went off the charts and started exploring topology, which I think is one of the biggest things that makes this really unique. I think, in the meantime, I've seen some people look into geometry, and there's a lot of people trying to strap geometric components onto current AI systems while keeping the kind of flawed probabilistic core to it. But the topology itself gives us so many different layers and nuances that the natural systems have that we were completely missing. So the PCM, so in the Navy scenario, the PCM won by remembering the LLM basically had to restart, engage cold. We even hard-coded some of the easy tactics for it to win into it, and it would just kind of pick at random, and wouldn't succeed against the PCM that was able to kind of optimize the system live in each scenario and learn from it. So yeah, we are in the process of getting a CRADA with the Navy, and we've been talking with DARPA a lot. They've been really interested. I think we told you guys before that we went and talked with one of the PMs at DARPA who's working on, he's actually a theoretical computer scientist from the university that I was most recently at. And, he had been thinking a lot about geometric AI already, and that was kind of the direction that he'd been thinking along the lines of, and was really excited to see how advanced we were already in it, that we were, based in mathematics and physics. And we have, most of our team is PhD mathematicians and physicists. And so we really approach it from a deep theoretical level. They had said that they had seen a couple others that, it was clear that the actual mathematics behind it wasn't understood. And I think it's really important if you're going to base it off of that rather than statistics, that you understand that. So it was really exciting to hear that they're really excited about it. They think, from my perspective, from what my understanding, it sounds like, they're agreeing that geometry is kind of the future to AI. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
And we submitted a couple more proposals since then. There's multiple more with the Navy, with the Army, with Air Force. There's even one that we submitted on that for the Air Force for, what was it? For the legal stuff. Anyway, just to help with, like sorting through legal cases and making them more efficient and all that. So there's a ton of interest there in the government in this, including in DARPA. And we didn't win one of these proposals, but there's two more. And, another one we're submitting next month. So, they're all out there, and it's a numbers game. Unfortunately, it just is what it is. But I think we have a pretty good shot there. So we better scoot. We're running a little late. Next slide.
All right, yeah. Prototype alpha, we actually had some big movement this week. So the prototype is an advancement off of what we had done before, and really a structured, going through getting each module of this structure ironed out theoretically, building the actual prototype of it, proving it. So let's see. Just reading through, reminding myself of this here. Right, yeah.
See if she can join back quick.
I feel like I'm on a timer. Go ahead.
Coming in. So. All right, go ahead.
Oh, okay, great.
And you might draw a parallel here to say, very high level the architecture between this and an LLM.
Between what?
This PCM and an LLM. What is very high level? What does it mean?
Right. So basically, because the PCM creates this map and this understanding and an internal structure, you can imagine, I don't know if you know of sonar embeddings, but when you embed language into an AI, it usually goes through something like sonar. And the context and the correlation between the words doesn't necessarily represent their actual closeness, and especially not in the context of what you're using it for, right? So when you use an LLM or an SLM, they're not able to correlate things in that way. And things that may seem close may actually be conceptually very far away for what you're using it for. Or ideas that are far away are maybe actually conceptually close, or things that seem to be, just statistically achievable from one point to another in our topology actually become inaccessible. So there's points where it learns from the data, that this becomes an inaccessible step moving from this point to the next. And so basically what it learns from all the data that it can get is the actual internal structure and working of it. And it learns it, it builds the map, and it continues to update it as it learns and grows. Right. So the product alpha right now is working with an SLM, the small language model, to first of all, to be able to route the information. So it learns all of the data, understands the situation, gets a prompt from a user. It is able to fully explore its map, gather all of the information. It knows what is relevant for the current state, hands this off to an SLM at the moment. The SLM produces a response based off of the actual reasoning, understanding, and geometrical knowledge from the PCM. This is kind of a very rudimentary way. There's a lot more complex than this, and it doesn't do it, step by step. But that information then passes back through the PCM that checks and knows, okay, this information that's being outputted directly aligns with the knowledge that we have, or it doesn't, and it blocks it, or it flags it and says there's different paths here, and this is not quite the direction, and comes back out. And so the idea here is that we can see what the SLM with the same prompt, with an LLM with the same prompt, versus going through the system that is connected with the PCM. So at the moment, the connection with the SLM and the PCM is just to give it a voice. It has the brains, it has the thinking, but we're not going to claim that it can speak as well as an LLM, in a short amount of time training that we've had it. And also, it really excels in thinking. And I think that is exactly where the LLM isn't. It's not thinking, it's throwing through statistical things, and it's able to make it sound really good in natural language. But the PCM component is really the thinking component. So basically it is able to to learn different structures and also adapt to different structures. It's not going to be rigid. It's not going to stay the same. So if, for example, you're trying to plan building a data center somewhere and suddenly war breaks out, how is that going to affect your investment? How is that going to affect things years down the road? And it's able to basically correlate, understand the structures and the geometry between these components in a way where it can shift, adapt, and say, actually, now this is the best path given this information.
Great.
Great. Want to do a quick time check. We have about 20 minutes left. So if there's a couple of slides, I wanted to let you keep going a little bit because I think you did answer a couple audience questions within that explanation. But
let's do the last slide because that's sort of like a business thing. So just so everybody understands what the timeline is for everything. So we are going to be working through evaluations with prospective early adopters who are going to be looking and using the alpha. We already have a Stanford connected biotech that's very enthusiastic. We are talking to a couple others. There's about 4 total that we'd like to enroll in kind of an evaluation program. And we don't think we're going to have any trouble. I mean, I just, whenever we talk to people about this, it solves all the problems they've got. It's suddenly the answer, and they get very excited about it, including I was just talking to the CEO of a pretty big personal care product company that said, yeah, I want in. I mean, it's like, in other words, it's not the obvious ones you think of necessarily. So oil and gas, and also, like I mentioned, talking at very high levels in the Pentagon. There's, probably what the early stage is going to look like, we think. I can't guarantee this, but what does an enterprise want? What does a big company want? They want to be able to keep their data behind their own firewall and not send it off to Anthropic or whatever. They want no hallucinations. They want to know that it's going to be accurate. And they don't want to pay, $100 million a year or 50 million or whatever they're paying for inference, which is, asking questions or having an agent deal with an LLM. Those are the big 3 in my mind. And so that's why we're calling this private AI, because you can put it behind, Megacorp can put it behind their firewall. It can learn their business. It'll learn it way better than any LLM could through just questions. And, it'll know the particulars of your business. It'll know the people in it. It'll know what goes right and what doesn't work and all that. Those are all really important factors. And they don't have to send their data somewhere, and they know it's going to be tons cheaper, and they know it's not going to lie to them. So we think that this is going to be a pretty good go-to-market as initial strategy. Now, there's lots of other things it can do, operate drones or whatever, and it may end up we do that. But so the plan is right now is raise a chunk of money, and if we're successful in doing that, and we have a lot of sort of big hitters waiting to see alpha, then we will see what we will see. That would be able to give us the money we need to make alpha into a real functioning, real product. And Alex's group, with Brian and others, they will continue to develop, new ideas for the architecture and improvements, and there's plenty to do. But we also need engineers who can crank this, this alpha and turn it into a robust, scalable product that is something that everybody can deal with. So that's the grand plan. I think with that, we can skip right to the questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's jump into some audience questions. Again, if you have any additional questions, please leave them in the comments and we'll try to get to as many as possible. But first one here in regards to PCM, Alex says, Alex, this one's for you. Is your PCM learning your daily use as you use it?
Yes, in a more in-depth way than just learning your use, right? So recognizing patterns of, so that, this is the overarching goal is not that it only adapts to the environment and the situation, but also the person using it, which is an option and a capability. And not only understanding, how you're using it in a way where, I look at the algorithm in my, let's say Instagram, and I'm like, wow, that was like a direct translation of what I just thought or said, or, but something more nuanced in a way where, maybe it comes up with a solution that is inherently a solution that you would come up with, but you hadn't thought of it yet. Right. So it's is capable of effectively kind of thinking in your style and learning with you in that way. And suggesting and giving you ideas that align with how you would think.
Very interesting. And then we have a couple questions kind of regarding the security of this, but there's a robotics law question here about, will it learn to not harm humans via prior experience, or how do you handle that?
I'd say, I told you about the different levels of knowledge that it has. On the most solid, unchangeable level, effectively, is its core beliefs, morals, and basically the laws that keep it from doing things like that. So, there's structure that you can build in and should build in that basically functions off of these hard-coded.
Trace what it's doing, right?
What was that?
Plus, you can trace what it's doing.
Yes.
How to arrive. Right.
You can see when its thoughts are getting dark, and but again, topologically, you can actually make it topologically inaccessible. You can make it so that there is a hole there, and it is physically incapable of accessing that, no matter what path it takes.
Great. So on its fundamental level, you can kind of make sure that it has kind of that moral guideline.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Yeah. Okay. We have another question here. Let's see. Is a new hardware architecture required? I assume required to run PCM on a device.
It's not. No. I run it on my laptop. Others in the team run it on Spark. I think, yeah, it can be run, I think, anywhere, and depending on the size, the scale, and how you want to run it, you can basically run it anywhere.
Great. Okay. Next question is, are all PCMs designed to be connected? And if so, how do you maintain privacy and security between them?
They're not designed to be connected, but they can be. So, if you want an individual instance of the PCM, it's not like it's connected to all other PCMs. This isn't like, Claude, where it uses one solid knowledge base for everybody. This is an individually trained AI for you. And if you want to federate it, then it's capable of, basically reproducing it in some form in the federated case. Now, the information that goes between it, as I said before, is just a geometric delta. So you don't have to actually share information like that. Or, let's say that you're wanting to maybe federate it and have one of the instances with a collaborator or someone else, but you don't want to expose the entire structure of your PCM. That's also something you can do. Basically, what it is just the map missing those certain areas in such a way where they can't access it. But it doesn't change the geometry between the actual knowledge that you did transfer, and it doesn't allow for extrapolation. They wouldn't be able to immediately extrapolate between this mountain and that mountain and know exactly, the valley that you have between to figure it out. So, yeah.
So ultimately kind of a case by case basis, maybe a large company would have them connected, whereas like a personal one, you could kind of have totally secure on your device.
Exactly. And then you can decide what part of it you're actually giving or, externalizing if needed.
Great.
Yeah, you can think about like a group of scientists who are collaborating on a project, and all their stuff could be completely federated, as respect to that information on that project. And so now they, can advance things a lot quicker if you think about science in general, when you read a paper, the paper reflects a lot of hard work, but it also doesn't reflect, and we tried that and it didn't work, and we tried this other thing and it didn't work. It's only like, ta-da, we were successful in this thing. And all the blind alleys and stuff are important, and they're all become usable, visible in a scenario in which you're federating between multiple scientists working on a project.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
That makes sense. Okay, we got a bit of a larger question here, so I'll try to break this up into chunks. But the first set being, can you talk about the dreaming state of PCM? What is the purpose, and how does it mimic how our human brains operate?
Oh. Nope. Oh, well, I think she got the question.
I think she got it. So we'll wait till she joins back in. Hopefully not too long. Did you get the full question there, Alex?
I think I got that up to how dreaming is similar to our dreaming.
Yeah, here, I'll just repeat it. Can you talk about the dreaming state of PCM? What is the purpose? How does it mimic how our human brains operate?
Okay, so basically in our dreaming state, if we experience things throughout the day, we fall asleep and we process them, whether we realize it or not. And so with the PCM, instead of just being there and ready when someone prompts it and responds, it actually is able to think, to learn, to evolve while it is in sleep mode, while in the form of dreaming. The difference with it is that, while we're dreaming, we're not able to actively access information or cross-check what our dreams are coming up with. We tend to, toddle off into fa la la land, which this will not do. So it is rooted in what it's able to understand. So imagine that throughout the day, maybe it had a few instances where it had to flag something as, this is inconsistent, I'm not sure, right? And so it knows these regions, okay, these are regions that things are kind of inconsistent, maybe I'll go explore them. And there's different ways of doing that too. You could potentially connect it to, the internet, or connect it to another LLM and have it be able to go into these regions and actually ask questions and kind of get extra knowledge. And now it wouldn't take that knowledge and say, okay, well, now this is fact, now I know it. It's information that kind of helps it understand the context of things that maybe it missed throughout the day. And it's also kind of a way to, we call it pruning, go through its ideas and say, well, this idea existed once, hasn't done anything since, is kind of useless, or maybe this idea actually belongs over here. And so it's kind of the cleanup crew that goes through at night, and but it can happen anytime when it's not being used.
Great. I think that actually partially answered the next question, which is, how does it potentially improve outcomes? And kind of what you're saying is, as it's in its dreaming state, it's connecting some of the dots or getting additional information.
Right. And then on top of that, as it's interacting with you and interacting with reality, it is also actively getting better at its responses, because it can see, this is the path that I predicted. This is the direction I predicted I'd be pointing when I got there. It was off. And so it kind of logs that, understands that, and can kind of shift, within a conversation. If it's,
Contrast that to an LLM, please.
Do what?
That's the next question is, can you provide a real world example and contrast that against traditional LLM?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I fight with my LLMs all the time, because, you tell it to go to a path and you say, well, that's not it. And so it goes back through its statistical process and scatters it and ends up somewhere completely different. It either completely overcorrects and avoids the path. And then the next time I ask it, I have to go through the same process over and over and over. And, then when you're not prompting it, it's not thinking, it's just waiting there for you to prompt it and go through that whole scenario over again, and may or may not remember, may or may not do any of that. So in contrast with the PCM, if you ask it a question and let's say, you're saying, okay, well, I want to see how this is going to turn out. How would you expect it to turn out? Based off of this is how I would expect it to turn out. Well, this is actually how it turned out. It will understand, oh, okay, that actually shifts, that changes my view of your current situation, reality. It takes that into consideration the next time it tries, it's asked something. And then if you're not using it, it's like, okay, well, this was something where my outcome contradicted with what actually happened. Let me go explore that. Let me look into more information. Let me get more detail on this to see if I can understand it better.
Yeah, great. I think it makes sense. It's and kind of going back to the question of how does it mimic the human mind? I think you can kind of see that in that kind of real world example.
Yeah.
Well said. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know, when you're interacting with someone, most people who have situational awareness and, you know, a little bit of emotional intelligence, right?
I'd have to figure that out.
Sorry about that, are able to adapt live to the situation, and they, you know, you get feedback from somebody. Did they respond well to it? Did they not? Is this what they wanted? You know, and we can shift, and that's, you know, effectively what it is able to do, is it's constantly changing its landscape based off of the situation it's in, and whether or not it stores that. I mean, you don't want to think just because that was my interaction with this person, that'll be my interaction with everyone for the rest of the day. You know, that's not helpful. So it's able to, in the dreaming state, kind of figure out at what level is this information relevant? Is this a profile of a person, or is this something that, you know, is for all people effectively?
Great. And I think maybe that ties in a little bit to the next question here, which is the essence of PCM that it organizes data into information versus LLM computing probabilities of aligning data?
It is, yeah, go ahead. Was there more to that?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
It is learning the actual structure of the knowledge itself, right? So it's not just learning the data structure, but also the usage of that data structure, the events that occur around it. So if it has, let's say, data structure for the events of what's going on in the world, and it has all the data of, you know, the market, it's able to directly correlate those things. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, makes sense to me. And I think next question kind of ties into a real world example, which is, can PCM be trained on coding best practices to have reoccurring self-improvement?
Yes. You know, and that's effectively also the dreaming. The dreaming state is it's able to loop through and train itself in its PCM way. Yeah.
Awesome. And here's a hardware question. What is the minimal successful size of a device you have run PCM on? As minimal as a Raspberry Pi device with 32 gig RAM or smaller?
That is a good question. That is more for my development team, since I've just been using, you know, basic MacBook Pro. But I mean, for me, that's the smallest device that I've run it on, and it runs quickly.
Yeah, I mean, MacBook Pro, I think that, you know, a lot of people have, you know, devices like that. So, well, great. I think we only have 2 minutes, so I want to close this out here. Maybe we have time for one last question. This one's for Charles specifically. Can PCM be made available for educational uses, like teaching in graduate system engineering courses, or for personal use?
Yeah, why not? Sure. I mean, there's, you know, like when it's a real product, not the alpha. The alpha is going to be, it's probably going to have some technical stuff you have to be able to do in order to run it and things like that. That's the standard how alphas are. But the slick, you know, final product, which, you know, we're not done, and it'll be a year and, you know, tens of thousands of man hours to generate it. But when that is out, yeah, there's no reason why it wouldn't apply to all the plain places that you use an LLM or an SLM and more, quite a lot more, in fact, because in a very limited form, you could probably run this on a Raspberry Pi. I mean, you can put an SLM on a Raspberry Pi too, but you're talking a lot of compromises if you do, which we just got.
Well, great. So thank you all, those of you who are watching. Again, Atombeam is currently raising on StartEngine, and if we didn't get to your questions, I know there was a lot of questions, make sure you go ahead and follow them on StartEngine, and, you know, they'll take your questions and and post some campaign updates regarding, some of the answers, so you can stay informed. And they also, I know Charles and team, you do a lot of live streams on StartEngine as well. And it's a great way to stay in the loop. So maybe I'll kick it over to you, Charles, Alex, any final thoughts?
Charles, do you have anything? Any closing lines?
I just want to thank everybody for tuning in and watching our show.
It's very exciting, and it's moving quickly, and a lot of new updates I think to come.
Finish up with what you think about it overall.
What do I think about it overall?
What do you think about PCM? What's your big conclusion?
Well, I'll tell you what I first thought, which I didn't, initially knew nothing about AI, and I show up and I, hear this whole idea of how it should work. And my first thought was, why is this not how it already works? Because this is how the universe works. This makes sense. Why? What are we doing? Wildly inefficient, and I think the PCM is capable of everything. To me, it's basically like, going from the horse and the carriage to an engine motor. Well, where can you put it? You can put it in everything. It can run everything, right? And so there's different, housing for it that you need to build. Is it a lawnmower? Is it a car? But it's the underlying architecture and function and structure of artificial cognition. And, I think it's incredible, and I'm very excited to see it blossom. So.
Yep. Well, I think we are at the cusp of something really big. This is not just another interesting variation on LLMs, world models, which are still static. One of the critical things here is it learns. If you got something that learns, that opens up a lot of stuff. Makes it more efficient, makes it capable of dreaming, it makes it capable of improving, it makes it capable of all kinds of things. And as Alex says, this is what the universe is based on. This is not the weird thing here, are LLMs. We're the thing you would expect, as Alex was just saying. So, anyway. All right.
Exciting stuff.
Thank you,
we'll close this out. Again, anyone who's watching, thank you. And please refer to Atombeam's offering materials on StartEngine for complete information and the associated risks on investment. So thank you again. And Charles, Alex, nice talking to you.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan.
Appreciate
it.
Thanks.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.